Hello, everyone.
Hello there.
To a large degree, our conversations are just that. They are not sermons, they are not dissertations, they are not presentations, they are conversations. And a conversation is you don't necessarily have the answer. Something pops up, a subject announces itself, something happens in your life, and you are intrigued by it. You wonder and you start talking. And that is why we constantly come back to conversation, to almost bounce it off each other and say, this is what I think. Does it make sense? So in our conversation, sorry to have to tell you that, we are thinking on issues maybe for the first time during the conversation.
We hear ourselves and then we understand better.
Yeah. And to a large extent, today's conversation is in that vein. Around an issue that came to the fore this week, more specifically, but it only came closer to the surface, but it is constantly there. And it is constantly part of our conversation, the two of us. But we thought of putting it within the wider conversation as well.
Yeah, and that is the question of how to make the contemplative spirituality more readily available to people. For the reason that it's been such a blessing in our lives, and that it really filled the void that we were both living with it for many years, and that we, looking back on our individual lives, we almost feel that we fell into the contemplative spirituality, which is not true, because it was a real search for meaning, for what really felt like the way that we believed God to be, and so the contemplative spirituality came to the fore, and it was like a homecoming.
Yes.
So it's a strong, almost like a calling for us to live contemplatively, but to also to convey the message of this. I don't want to call it an option, but this. What word could we use? This way of looking at life and looking at God. So maybe just to recap again, what would contemplative spirituality be at the core?
Yeah, before I touch on that, maybe also having experienced that and living the contemplative life and constantly being in conversations with believers, Christians, and so on, who are searching, who are at difficult places in their lives, but somehow don't get themselves to step into contemplative spirituality. It's almost as if they say, no, there must be something wrong with me, but they don't see that as an option to enter that, and it intrigues us.
I think maybe because we were brought up in a certain way, and the mainstream spirituality that we grew up with, and that most people that we engage with are not a contemplative stance.
Yeah.
So, and we were talking about it in the Afrikaans version, that if you're hungry for something, but you don't know what you're hungry for, and it's not placed before you, or then you don't really know You don't know that it's there.
Mm.
It's unknown.
Mm.
So for us, it was a journey. I don't think everybody start looking to fill the void. I think, like you said, people generally, I myself was looking at myself and saying, I'm not a good enough Christian. I need to pray more, read my Bible more. So I looked in my context at first, and I think it was only in coming to know God in a contemplative way that my image of God could change, and I could feel that God is coming closer, that God is near, that God is showing himself everywhere, and God is not far and looking down and being an angry God like I perceived him to be growing up.
Yeah, and you asked what would we say is some of the
The core elements.
The elements of contemplative spirituality. I think there is a big openness of discovery and being open to what enters our lives and so on, in terms of not having the final answers and being comfortable with not knowing. That was a very, very important thing. To say, I'm not quite sure how to do this, or
who God really
is. I'm in this process of discovering, and it is not in some way a reflection on my lack of faith or trust or anything, but it's part of the journey with God, and that God invites us actually in this process of discovery. So to be comfortable with not knowing.
And mystery, really.
And mystery.
God as mysterious, that we will never know God fully.
Yes. So that's a very, very important thing. And there's also a very creative part in contemplative spirituality, because it's this discovery of aspects of God and of people and of creation that we never thought about. So it announces itself. It's this openness to that. So it's also very much a listening stance. Not entering with, I will tell you what the state of affairs is, but what do I hear in this situation? And being open to whatever announces itself. So it starts to a large degree with a yes. You step into a situation with anybody, not only Christians, not only people from my faith tradition, but all people, and you start with a yes and a listening stance, knowing that God is also conversing with us, in this conversation with us, with other people.
And coming from a place of love.
And of love.
So there's a big difference in terms of growing up fearing God.
Yes.
For judgment and all of that. And
retribution.
And coming to know God as accepting and loving and actually enjoying me.
That's a word that it bubbled up.
Yeah.
There's God finds joy in people and in the created world.
Yeah.
So in other words,
and shows himself. So it becomes an adventure.
Absolutely. Constantly. Because you're not set on outcomes, you're open to what God is announcing, what God is giving, what God is showing also through this created world. And his creation, which he loves, which isn't sinful, bad, something that you have to shun and have to get out of the way so that you can be on your way to heaven and the hereafter, but really to love what God has given us and what God has created. So those in broad strokes are the elements of contemplative spirituality. So silence is very, very important, because my agenda, my ego constructs aren't so in the fore, and there's a constant awareness of how my ego comes to the fore and hampers this conversation.
So it's also a life of being much more mindful.
Yes.
Of becoming aware of when it is my ego taking the lead, or where I'm allowing God to take the lead.
Yes.
So very much to do with mindfulness, being in the present moment. And like I say, for me personally, and I think you can also attest to that, is that it was like coming home and that void was filled. So we live this life, and I think that's the main reason we have a retreat center and we do these conversations, is because we want to get the word out. That there is more, and that it's available, and that it's not wrong to look for something else if you are not being, if you don't feel that you are nourished by where you are in your relationship with God. And the question just remains how to get it out there. I think with all these things, these tools that we were mentioning, but then I also think that if we truly, and in our lives, that was true, that when we were ready, the teacher appeared, the books appeared, so many wonderful things. But we feel called to be there when people are ready to hear the message, or to hear this alternative. And it's difficult to know how to and where to be.
Yeah, so maybe just to say, you don't have to get stuck in one single image. Because I think a big part of our own journey is growing up, and as young adults and in our adulthood, being in a relationship with God, being in faith community and so on, and having an experience of things that don't add up. And then through life experiences and so on, and in a process of where we're not in control and things falling apart, discovering this and entering into it, and as you say, a homecoming where you say, this is what I was looking for, because things add up. Why does God create the loves in me? Why do I have senses? Why is the created world so beautiful? So just by saying that it is good to keep on searching when there's a void in your life.
And there's nothing wrong with you when
No.
you have that feeling that there should be more. And that you can actually explore it, and that God will be with you on that journey. That God can handle questions, and that it has to do with our intention and the sincerity of our hearts in terms of the relationship that we feel we want to have with God, and this gap that we don't seem to be able to bridge. And then to trust that the teacher will appear.
And also, especially where you find that within a modern context, there's often a feeling that, well, you know what, God and the relationship with God is so outdated. But what we find is it is so practical and it fills life with meaning, but on a very deep, permeating way. So to also, I think that's what Jesus meant when he said, I want you to live life to its fullest.
And I think it's just in our hearts that there should be that should be somewhere as an option, as an alternative way of looking at God, which that is really something that we care about.
And that you might be in a space in your life where you are looking for the more, the marges. There's nothing wrong with you. And it might just be the stirrings of the Holy Spirit beckoning you to go deeper and to step out on a journey of discovery.
We would like to hear what you think about this conversation of ours.
And thank you for being part of the conversation and allowing us to have our conversation. We talk again next week.
Keep well, everyone.